Hey everyone, in this video, we are going to solve a popular JavaScript interview question which used the concept of currying. So the question is, we have to convert a normal function like this to this curried syntax. So let's see how we can do it. But first let's understand what is currying. So currying is a technique in JavaScript using which we can transform a given function which is taking multiple arguments into a series of functions each taking a single argument. So let's understand this with an example. So let's understand currying with a simple example. So we are given a function sum which all it does is take two arguments and return their addition, and we want to achieve the same thing but using currying this time. So let me comment this one. So as per the definition, currying is a technique in which a function expects a certain amount of arguments and also returns another function. So we'll create a function. I'll call it, let's say, sum. It will take, let's say, only one argument, and it will be returning us another function which will be taking another argument b. So this first argument 1 will become a, and this second argument 2 will become b, and here inside this function we will be returning a plus b. Now how will we call this particular function? So we'll call it as console.log. We'll call sum and pass it the first number which is 1. Now this particular statement will return us this new function. Let's try to console.log it to clarify. So if I run this, you'll see we are getting another function which is expecting an argument b and returning a plus b. Now I'll call the function that is being returned using these braces. So using this, I can call the function that is returned by sum1, and as the next argument, I'll pass the another number b. So if I save this and go to the console, you'll see we are getting the same result. So that's how currying works in JavaScript. Now let's get back to our question. Alright, so we are given a function sum which is taking 4 numbers as parameters, a, b, c and d, and all it is doing is returning us the sum of all these numbers. Now what we want to do here is create a function curry, and we'll pass this sum function to it here, and it will return us another function which we can call in curried format. So it can be like this. So we are at each function call we are passing a single argument, or also we can pass multiple arguments in a single call as well, like this, or 3 in one and 1 in a separate call. One thing more to add, if we pass all the arguments to this function at once, just like if we were being called, just like we had called this sum function, in that particular case also this should work. So let's see how we can do it. One thing we know for sure is that this function will be returning us another function. So we'll return a function from here, and it will be expecting some arguments. So this return function, at first time it may have one argument in it, two argument in it, or multiple 3, 4, any number of arguments in it. So for that I'll add a rest parameter here. I'll call it args. Now inside this function, I need to check whether this args have all the parameters or not. So let's say if this was the case, to the curry sum function, I passed all the 4 numbers. In that particular case, I just need to call this sum function which is in the fn variable and pass all the args to it and return the given result. Now how do we calculate that this args variable contain all the arguments or not which were present inside the fn function? So for that we can write if args dot length is greater than or equal to fn dot length. If this is the case, that means args contain all the arguments, all the 4 arguments. How? So what does this function dot length returns? It returns us the number of parameters expected by the function fn. So in this particular case, function fn is our function sum, and it is expecting 4 parameters in it. So the output of fn dot length will be 4. So we'll check if we have 4 arguments in fn dot length. That means we got all our arguments and we just need to call this fn function and pass all the 4 arguments. So we'll return the result written by the fn function and we'll pass all the arguments here. If this sounds confusing, I'll repeat it one more time. We'll dry run this once we are done with the whole code. Now we have covered the case when arguments.length is equal to or greater than the fn.length. We got all the 4 numbers. But what if we got only a single one, or only 2 of them, or only 3 of them? What will happen in that particular case? In that particular case, so if we see the syntax, if there is a single argument passed to it, so this particular part will be returning another function which will call here and pass next arguments to it. Similarly, in the second case, this particular part will be returning us another function to which will pass the rest of the parameters 3, 4. So let's write what we'll do here. So if we don't have all the 4 numbers, we'll return another function here which may contain a 1, 2 or multiple arguments. So here as well, I'll create a rest parameter called rest, called next. Now what will this function should do? So we'll see that we need to do some sort of a recursion here, because this is our base condition. If we got all the 4 arguments, if our arguments.length is equal to fn.length, then we are calling the sum function and we are passing all the 4 numbers to it. But what if we got only 1 or 2? How can we know that the next 2 or the next remaining numbers are here or not? So for that we need to make a recursive call to this particular function again. So for that, what we need to do, instead of returning an anonymous function, we need to create it as a named function. So we'll call it, let's say, curriedfn. And now inside this particular function, I'll call the curried function again, and I need to update the arguments to it. So let's say in first case, when I call this particular function, args will only contain 1 in it. And next time, when I'm calling it again, I need to pass both of them. This next variable will contain the number 2 in it. So when I'm calling again the curried function, I need to pass both of these number 1 and 2 both. So for that, I'll pass it like this. I'll pass args, then I'll also combine it with next arguments. So this is the whole code we need. Don't worry, we'll try run this again to understand it thoroughly. So let's run this and see what's the output. Okay, it's saying curry sum is not a function. Oh, okay. I got the issue. So the issue is here I need to return curried function here. So let's see it now. Yes, we are getting the right output in all of these 4 cases. So now let's try to dry run this to understand how exactly this whole function is working. So we'll start from the first case. Actually, to understand it in a more better way, let's start it from the last example. So let's say we call the curry sum function. So this curry sum will contain this return function curriedfn. Now we are passing all the 4 numbers to it. So this variable args will contain all the 4 numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so next we'll go inside the if condition. We'll check if args.length is greater than or equal to fn.length, which in this particular case is true. So here args.length is 4. These four numbers that we pass to curry sum, and fn.length, which is the number of parameters this function was expecting, function sum, which is also 4. So this condition is true. And now what we'll do, we'll call the fn function and pass all the arguments to it. So what we are doing here is we are calling this sum function. This sum function is present inside the fn variable. So we are calling the sum function and we are passing all the four numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 to it, and the result that this function is returning, we are returning it from here as well so that it can be logged in the console. So here output 10 we get. Now let's see what will happen in the third example. So let's say we call the curry sum function, but this time we pass only 3 numbers first time. So what will happen? So this args will contain only 3 numbers. So in this particular case, args.length, which is 3, is not greater than equal to fn.length, which is 4. So if condition will not run, will go to the else condition. Now we are returning another function from here, which will be expecting the next argument. So this particular statement, this particular part will be returning us another function which we are running here and passing the next argument, which is 4 to it. So this variable next will contain the number 4 in it. Now we need to update the value present inside the args, and for that we need to make a recursive call to the curry define function, which is what we are doing here. We are recursively calling the curry define function, but this time we need to update the arguments. We need to pass the previous arguments, which were 1 2 3, and the new argument which we got in the next variable, which is 4. So we are combining both of them and passing it again to the curry function. So again curry function will be called, but this time args contain all the 4 numbers in it. So again if condition will run, we'll call the sum function and will pass all the four numbers to it. It will return us the result, the sum of all those numbers, and will return it from here, which we are console logging it here. Now let's see the second example. So we are calling the curry sum function and we are passing 1 and 2 as initial arguments. So what will happen? Inside this curry define function, this args will contain 1 and 2 in it. If condition will not execute because args.length is 2 and fn.length is 4. So we'll go inside the else condition. Here we are returning a new function which will be expecting next arguments. So this particular part will be returning as a function and we'll call the return function here and we'll pass 3 and 4 as next argument. So this next variable will contain 3 and 4. Now we are again recursively calling the curry define function, and this time we are combining the previous arguments and the new arguments. So this time the curry define will be called with the updated arguments 1 2 3 4. Here if condition will get true because args.length will be 4, fn.length is also 4. So we'll call the fn function, which is the function sum, and we'll pass all the 4 numbers to it 1 2 3 4. And the return sum will return it from here, which will be console.logging it here. Okay, that was the second case. Now let's see the first scenario, which is also the last example in our case. So this time we're calling the curry sum, but we are only passing one single parameter. So this time args inside curry define will only contain 1 in it. So this time args.length is only 1. So if condition obviously will not run, we'll go inside the else condition and will return another function. So this part curry define 1 will return us another function which will call it here and will pass 2 as the next argument. So this variable next will contain 2. We'll recursively call the curry define function again because we need to update the arguments. So we'll pass the updated arguments 1 comma 2. Now still args.length is 2. It's still not true. So again we'll go inside the else condition and again a new function will be returned. So now this time this much part will return as a function and will pass 3 to it as next argument. So this variable next will contain 3 in it. We'll again call curry define function recursively, passing it 1 2 and the next parameter 3 to it. So curry define function will be called with 1 2 3 as arguments. Still if condition is not true because args.length is 3 and we need 4 arguments. So we'll go inside the else condition. We'll again return a new function. So this time this much part will return us a new function. We'll call it here and we'll pass 4 as the next argument. This time args contain 1 2 3 and next contain 4. We'll combine them and recursively call curry define function again. This time args contain all the 4 arguments here. Now if condition will get true, since args.length is 4 and fn.length is also 4, we'll call the fn function, which is the function sum. We'll pass all the 4 numbers to it, and just like the last time, we'll return the result from here and console.log it here. So that's how this whole code works. Hope this was helpful. Thank you for watching.